Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship, looking out at the stars. His vessel, the USS Phoenix, was the pride of Earth's fleet. Today would be the most important day in human history. After 70 years of waiting, humanity would finally learn if they could join the Galactic Harmony Council as full members. The diplomatic station called Harmony's Edge floated in space near the planet Kepler Prime. It was huge, bigger than any human city. 12 different alien species had built it together as a place where they could meet and talk about keeping peace in the galaxy. For 3,000 years, these aliens had worked together. No wars, no fighting, just peaceful cooperation between. The stars. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked up beside Morrison. She was Earth's top diplomat, a woman who had spent her whole life trying to make friends with aliens. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her uniform was perfect. She had to be perfect today. Everything depended on her speech to the council. "Are you ready for this?" Morrison asked her. Sullivan nodded. "We've done everything right. We've helped them fight their enemies. We've shared our technology. We've saved lives across a dozen worlds. They have to accept us now." Dr. Ben Rodriguez joined them at the window. He was a scientist who studied alien cultures. For 30 years, he had lived among different alien species, learning their ways. He knew more about alien thinking than any other human alive. "The Xanthari are still against us," Rodriguez said quietly. "I can tell by how they're acting. They think we're too dangerous." "Dangerous?" Morrison laughed. "We've been nothing but helpful for 70 years. "That's not what they mean," Rodriguez explained. "They think humans are unpredictable. They see how we can be both kind and violent, sometimes in the same day. It scares them." Commander Lisa Parker came onto the bridge. She was a soldier, one of the best Earth had ever produced. She had fought side by side with alien warriors against the Void Reapers in the border wars. Aliens had died to save her life, and she had done the same for them. "The shuttle is ready," Parker said. "Time to go make history." The 4 humans took a small ship over to Harmony's Edge. As they flew closer, Morrison could see how beautiful the station was. It looked like a crystal flower floating in space, with sections built by each of the 12 council species. The Xanthari section glowed with soft light. The Melleran section looked like a garden in space. The Hydrus section was filled with water where the fish-like aliens could swim. Inside the council chambers, the aliens were already waiting. Morrison had seen them before, but it still amazed him how different they all were. The Xanthari looked like walking crystals, tall and sharp and beautiful. They were the oldest species in the council, and they acted like they knew everything. The Melleran looked like giant flowers that could walk. They were peaceful creatures who talked by making their petals glow in different colors. They had never fought a war in their entire history. The Hydrus wore special suits filled with water so they could breathe. Through the clear parts of their suits, Morrison could see their fish-like faces and their big, dark eyes. The cavalry looked like huge insects, but they were smart and organized. They could work together like parts of one giant mind. Their clicking sounds filled the air as they talked to each other. There were 8 other species in the chamber, each one stranger than the last. Some looked like animals from Earth, others were so alien that humans had no words to describe them properly. "Hi." Arbiter Velfak of the Xanthari called the meeting to order. His crystal body reflected the light in the room, making rainbow patterns on the walls. "We are here to decide if the species called humanity should become full members of our council," Velfak said. His voice sounded like music made of glass. "Admiral Sullivan of Earth will speak first." Sullivan walked to the center of the chamber. Every alien eye was on her as she began to speak. "Honored members of the council," she said, "humanity comes before you today not as beggars but as partners. For 70 years, we have proven our worth. We have shared our healing technology, saving millions of lives across the galaxy. We have helped terraform dead worlds so refugee populations could have new homes. We created the universal translation matrix that lets all our species talk to each other." She gestured to the walls around them. "This very station uses human technology in its power systems. Our quantum generators keep the lights on and the air clean. When the Void Reapers attacked the outer colonies, human ships fought beside yours. Human soldiers died protecting alien families they had never met. Morrison watched the aliens as Sullivan spoke. Some seemed interested, others looked bored. The Zenthari just stared with their crystal eyes, showing no emotion at all. We have changed, Sullivan continued. Once, humans fought each other on our homeworld. We had wars and violence, but we learned. We grew, we became better. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves. We want to help keep the peace that you have built. When Sullivan finished, Velthok stood up. His crystal body made soft ringing sounds as he moved. Humanity speaks of change, he said. But recent events show this change may not be real. Our scouts report that human colonies in the Outer Rim are building weapons, military bases, defense platforms. This does not look like a peaceful species to us. Morrison felt his heart sink. The alien scouts had seen the preparations, but they didn't understand why humans were making them. There were threats coming from beyond the galaxy, dangers that the Council refused to believe existed. A Melloran representative glowed with soft blue light as she spoke. Our studies of human psychology show concerning patterns. Humans can change from peaceful to violent very quickly. This makes them unpredictable. How can we trust a species that might become dangerous without warning? Other aliens began to speak. The Sorok, who looked like giant lizards, complained that humans were too aggressive in trade negotiations. The Luxari, beings made of pure energy, said that human emotions were too strong and chaotic for peaceful cooperation. Even the species that humans had helped began to speak against them. The Aquari, whose homeworld humans had saved from an asteroid impact, said they were worried about human military expansion. The Felloid cat-like aliens who had fought beside human soldiers claimed that humans enjoyed combat too much to be truly peaceful. Morrison watched Sullivan's face as species after species rejected humanity. Her calm mask never slipped, but he could see the pain in her eyes. Finally, the vote was called. One by one, each species announced their decision. The Hydras chose not to vote at all, as they always did in difficult matters. But every other species voted the same way. No, Velthok stood to announce the final judgment. The crystal being's voice filled the chamber like the sound of breaking glass. The species known as humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Harmony Council. Your aggressive nature and unpredictable behavior make you a threat to the peace we have maintained for 3,000 years. You have 6 months to remove all human presence from Council space. If you violate this exile, the combined Council fleet will force you to leave. Sullivan stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then she nodded once. We understand, she said quietly. Humanity will comply with your decision. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Morrison heard some of the aliens talking quietly among themselves. A few seemed uncomfortable with what had just happened, but none of them spoke up to change the vote. On the shuttle ride back to the Phoenix, no one said anything for a long time. Finally, Rodriguez broke the silence. They're afraid of what they don't understand, he said. They think peace means being weak, but they're about to learn something important. There's a big difference between choosing to be peaceful and only being able to be peaceful. Morrison looked out at the stars as their ship pulled away from Harmony's edge. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, something was coming. Something that would test every species in Council space. The aliens had just thrown away their best hope of survival because they were afraid of human strength. Let them learn the hard way, Morrison said quietly. When the real danger comes, they'll understand what they've done. And then they'll beg us to save them. But by then, humanity would return on their own terms. Not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as the galaxy's only hope for survival. The Council had made their choice. Soon, they would live with the consequences. 6 months had passed since the Council threw humanity out of their space. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Hughes Valiant. This wasn't like the diplomatic vessel he used to command. The Valiant was a warship, Built for fighting and winning battles that no one else could win, the ship floated near Frontier Station Omega, humanity's most distant outpost. Beyond this point lay the dark space between galaxies, where no council species had ever dared to explore. But humans were different. They always wanted to know what was out there, even if it was dangerous. Dr. Amy Collins ran into the bridge, her face pale with fear. She was the head of the Deep Space Monitoring Array, the most powerful sensor system humans had ever built. For months, she had been watching the space beyond their galaxy, looking for threats that might come from the darkness. "Admiral Morrison," she said, breathing hard. "You need to see this right now." Morrison followed her to the sensor room. Banks of computers filled the walls, all of them showing readings that made no sense. Dr. Ryan Blake, the station's top physicist, looked up from his work with worried eyes. "What am I looking at?" Morrison asked. "The end of everything," Collins said quietly. "We've been tracking massive gravitational disturbances beyond the galaxy's edge. At first we thought they were natural events, maybe colliding black holes. But the pattern is wrong. These disturbances are moving toward us, and they're getting bigger." Blake pulled up a star chart on the main screen. Red dots marked the locations of the disturbances, forming a line that pointed straight at their galaxy. "We call them the Devourers," Blake explained. "They're not natural at all. They're machines, but bigger than anything we've ever seen. Each one is the size of a small moon, and there are thousands of them." Morrison stared at the screen. "How do you know they're machines?" "Because they're converting everything they touch," Collins said. "We watched them hit a dead solar system 3 months ago. In 72 hours, they turned 5 planets and a star into more of themselves. They eat matter and energy, then use it to make more devourers." The Admiral felt cold fear creep up his spine. "How long before they reach council space?" 18 months, Blake said. "Maybe less if they speed up." Morrison thought about the aliens who had rejected humanity. The proud Zenthari with their crystal cities, the peaceful Melleran who had never known war, the council races who thought their treaties and diplomacy could solve any problem. "Do they know?" he asked. Collins shook her head. "We sent warning messages to every council species 6 months ago. They all came back marked as undelivered. The council has blocked all communication from human space. They don't want to hear anything we have to say." Morrison walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy beyond imagination was coming to destroy everything. The council had thrown out humanity because they thought humans were too dangerous for peace. Now they would face real danger, and they had no idea it was coming. "Sir," Collins said quietly, "there's something else. The Devourers aren't just randomly destroying things, they're learning. Each system they hit, they adapt their tactics. They study whatever tries to fight them, then counter it perfectly the next time. What does that mean for us?" Morrison asked, and Blake answered. "It means traditional warfare won't work against them. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, nuclear bombs, they'll adapt to all of it. We need something they can't predict or counter." Morrison thought about humanity's secret projects, the weapons and technologies they had been developing while the Council debated their membership. Projects that violated every treaty the Council had ever written about acceptable military technology. "Get May General Harrison," Morrison ordered. General Paul Harrison appeared on the communication screen a few minutes later. He was commanding the Outer Rim Defense Force from his headquarters on the fortress world of New Sparta. Behind him, Morrison could see the construction yards where humanity's secret fleet was being built. "Admiral," Harrison said, "I was wondering when you'd call. My scouts have been tracking the same signals your people found." "How long have you known?" Morrison asked. 3 years, Harrison admitted. "That's why we've been building up the Outer Rim defenses. We knew something like this was coming. The question is, what do we do about it?" Morrison made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. "We save everyone, whether they want us to or not." Harrison smiled grimly. "Even after what the Council did to us?" "Especially because of what they did to us," Morrison replied. "They cast us out because they thought we were too dangerous?" Now they're going to learn what real danger looks like. And when they do, they'll understand why they needed us all along. Dr. Collins brought up more sensor data. Admiral, the first wave has just entered the outer edge of our galaxy. They hit a mining system called Kepler 442. It was abandoned after the Council created their new defensive zones. Morrison watched the readings as the Devourer swarm fell on the empty system. Even with no one to defend it, the destruction was horrifying. Planets that had taken billions of years to form were consumed in hours. "Send a message to Earth," Morrison ordered. "Tell them it's time to activate the Prometheus fleet." The Prometheus fleet was humanity's greatest secret. For 60 years, while they begged for acceptance from the Council, humans had been building ships that used technology the aliens had never imagined. Ships that could bend space and time, weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, and most importantly, human crews trained to think in ways that confused any enemy. Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on the communication screen from Earth. She was now Secretary of Galactic Affairs, but Morrison could see she was ready for war. "Jake," she said, "I've been expecting this call. How bad is it?" "Worse than we feared," Morrison replied. "The Council has maybe a year before the core worlds fall. Their fleets won't even slow these things down." Sullivan nodded. "The President has authorized Operation Salvation. We're going back to Council space, but not as diplomats this time." "What are our orders?" Morrison asked. "Save the galaxy," Sullivan said simply. "On our terms," Morrison understood. Humanity would return to the space that had rejected them, but they wouldn't return as beggars seeking acceptance. They would come back as the galaxy's saviors, demanding the respect and authority they had been denied. Over the next few days, reports came in from across the galaxy. The Devourers had hit 3 more systems, each time moving faster and destroying more efficiently. The Council finally started receiving automated distress signals from the attack systems, but they didn't understand what they were seeing. Collins intercepted Council communications as alien leaders tried to make sense of the attacks. The Zenthari thought it was some kind of natural disaster. The Melloran believed it might be a species they could negotiate with. The cavalry were trying to analyze the swarm tactics, but their insect-like thinking couldn't comprehend an enemy that adapted faster than they could plan. "They're panicking," Collins reported. "Half the Council species are calling for emergency meetings. The other half are retreating to their core worlds and hoping the problem goes away." Morrison watched the tactical displays as the Devourer swarm continued its advance. Each attack was perfectly executed with no wasted motion or resources. This wasn't just an invasion, it was an extermination carried out with mechanical precision. "Sir," Blake called out, "we're getting reports from the front lines. Some Council fleets tried to engage the Devourers at the edge of Zenthari space." "And?" Morrison asked. "Total defeat. The enemy adapted to their weapons in real time. Energy shields, kinetic barriers, plasma cannons, nothing worked for more than a few minutes. The Devourers learned from each attack and countered it perfectly." Morrison thought about the human ships hidden in the Outer Rim shipyards. Ships built using principles that made adaptation impossible because they constantly changed their own nature. Technology that the Council had banned as too dangerous for civilized warfare. "How long before our fleet is ready?" he asked Harrison. 2 weeks for the advance force," the general replied. 6 weeks for the full battle group." "We don't have 6 weeks," Morrison said. "The advance force will have to do." Admiral Sullivan's image appeared on the screen again. "Jake, I'm sending you the official authorization. As of right now, you have command of all human military forces. Your mission is to return to Council space and establish humanity as the dominant power in this galaxy." Morrison accepted the datapad with his new orders. He was no longer just a ship captain or even an admiral. He was now the supreme commander of humanity's military forces, with authority to make decisions that would reshape the entire galaxy. "What about the aliens who voted against us?" he asked. Sullivan's expression was cold. "They made their choice when they threw us out. Now they'll live with the consequences." We'll save them from the Devourers, but the galaxy they wake up in will be very different from the one they knew. Morrison looked out at the stars one more time. Soon, the human fleet would return to Council space. But they wouldn't return as the same species that had been rejected 6 months ago. They would return as conquerors bringing salvation at the point of a sword. The Council had wanted to see how dangerous humanity could be. Now they would find out. High Arbiter Velthok stood in the crystal spires of Zenthari Prime, watching his world die. The great light cities that had glowed for 50,000 years were going dark one by one. The Devourers had come to his homeworld like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything they touched. The same being who had pronounced humanity's exile now faced the consequences of that decision. His crystal body trembled as he watched the swarm convert his people's greatest achievements into more of themselves. Ships, buildings, even the sacred memory crystals that held Zenthari history, all of it became fuel for the endless hunger. "Hi, Arbiter," his aide whispered. "The evacuation ships are ready." Velthok did not move. "How many of our people have we lost?" 3 billion so far. The outer cities fell in the first day. The old Zenthari closed his crystal eyes. 3 billion. Lives ended because the Council had been too proud to listen to human warnings, too afraid of human strength to accept their help when it was offered freely. Admiral Zektar of the Sorok commanded the combined Council fleet from his flagship above Zenthari Prime. His reptilian face showed the strain of watching his forces fail against an enemy they could not understand. Traditional tactics meant nothing against the Devourers. Every weapon the Council used was analyzed and countered within minutes. "All ships, fall back to the second defensive line," Zektar ordered. His fleet of 3,000 vessels retreated from the swarm, leaving Zenthari Prime to its fate. In the void between stars, the Devourer collective processed the battle data. Each Council ship's weapons, defenses, and tactics were recorded and catalogued. Future encounters would be even easier. The organic species fought with patterns they had used for millennia. Predictable, inefficient, soon to be extinct. On Earth, President Helen Carter stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by humanity's military leaders. The wall screens showed the destruction of Zenthari Prime in real time, transmitted by human spy satellites that the Council had never detected. "It's time," she said simply. Admiral Morrison's image appeared on the main screen. He was aboard the UES Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Behind him, 200 human vessels waited in formation, the advance force of humanity's secret fleet. "Operation Prometheus is authorized," President Carter announced. "Admiral Morrison, you have full authority to conduct military operations in Council space. Save who you can, but make it clear that humanity is in charge now." Morrison nodded. "Understood, Madam President. We'll show them what real warfare looks like." The human fleet entered Council space through a dimensional jump that bypassed all their sensors. One moment, the space around the ruined Kepler 442 system was empty. The next, 200 human ships materialized as if they had been created from nothing. Captain Lisa Parker commanded the heavy cruiser UES Defiance. She had fought beside alien soldiers in the border wars, watching good beings die because their technology and tactics were centuries behind what humanity had developed in secret. Now she would show them what humans could really do. "Devourer harvesting fleet detected," her tactical officer reported. 47 enemy vessels, currently stripping the 4th planet. Parker smiled coldly. "Perfect. Time for their first lesson. All weapon stations, prepare quantum disruption charges." The Defiance moved toward the Devourer fleet with impossible grace. Human ships didn't fight like alien vessels. They didn't rely on thick armor or powerful shields. Instead, they used technologies that made conventional defenses meaningless. The quantum disruption charges fired in perfect silence. Where they hit Devourer ships, reality itself became uncertain. The enemy's adaptive systems tried to counter the attack, but how do you adapt to weapons that constantly change the fundamental laws of physics around them? For the first time since the war began, Devourer ships began exploding instead of adapting. Direct hits on 12 enemy vessels, Parker's weapons officer reported with satisfaction. They're not regenerating, they're actually dying. The remaining Devourer ships tried to retreat, but human pursuit craft were already surrounding them. These weren't ordinary starfighters. They were dimensional interceptors that could appear anywhere in space without warning. Within an hour, the entire Devourer harvesting fleet was destroyed. Not disabled or driven away, completely annihilated. The human fleet collected the wreckage for study, then broadcast a message on all council frequencies. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on every communication screen in council space. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We have just eliminated a Devourer fleet that your combined forces could not even slow down. Humanity has returned to council space, but not as your supplicants. He paused, letting his words sink in. Any species that wants our protection will acknowledge human authority in this war. We will defend your worlds and your people, but the post-war galaxy will be under human leadership. You have 24 hours to respond. On Melloran Prime, the flower-like beings glowed with panicked colors as they debated Morrison's ultimatum. They had voted against humanity because violence was against their nature. Now they faced extinction unless they accepted human protection. Council Leader Bloom of Eternal Peace spoke for her species. We must accept. The humans may be violent, but they are not genocidal like these devourers. We will live under their rule rather than die under our principles. The Hydras retreated to their deepest ocean worlds, hoping the Devourers would ignore aquatic environments. The Kavri attempted to swarm a Devourer scout force and watch their fleets disappear into the mechanical mass. One by one, Council species sent messages of surrender to Admiral Morrison. Dr. Ben Rodriguez, now serving as Morrison's advisor on alien psychology, read the responses with mixed feelings. These were species he had lived among, learned from, and respected. Now they were begging for protection from the people they had rejected. How many have accepted our terms? Morrison asked. All of them except the Sauroch, Rodriguez replied. Admiral Zektar is still trying to coordinate a traditional defense. Morrison pulled up the tactical display showing Sauroch positions. Their fleet was impressive by old standards, but against the Devourers they would last maybe an hour. Send him our battle recordings from Kepler 442, Morrison ordered. Show him what happens when you fight the Devourers the old way, and what happens when you fight them our way. An hour later, Admiral Zektar's image appeared on Morrison's screen. The proud Sauroch looked older than his years, his scaled face showing the strain of impossible choices. Human Morrison, Zektar said, using the formal address of his species. I have seen your battle recordings, your weapons. They should not be possible. Many things humans do shouldn't be possible, Morrison replied. That's what makes us effective against impossible enemies. Zektar was quiet for a long moment. If I surrender my fleet to your command, will you truly protect Sauroch civilians? I give you my word as a human officer, Morrison said. We will defend every innocent life in this galaxy, regardless of how their leaders voted in council chambers. The Sauroch Admiral nodded slowly. Then I place my fleet under your command. But know this, when this war is over, there will be a reckoning for what you have done to the balance of power. Morrison's expression didn't change. Admiral Zektar, when this war is over, there won't be a balance of power. There will be human power, and those who accept it will prosper. Those who don't will find themselves on the wrong side of history. Dr. Amy Collins' voice came over the communication system from her monitoring station. Admiral, massive Devourer fleet detected entering the Hydra system. They're not ignoring the ocean worlds after all. Morrison turned to his fleet commanders. All ships, prepare for a dimensional jump to Hydras Prime. It's time to show the galaxy what the Terran Defense Force can really do. Captain Parker's ship materialized above the blue-green world of Hydras Prime, just as the Devourer swarm began its descent toward the ocean surface. The aquatic aliens had built their cities deep underwater, thinking themselves safe from a surface-based enemy. They were wrong. The Devourers adapted to underwater operations within minutes, their mechanical forms reshaping themselves for aquatic environments. All ships, form attack formation Omega, Morrison ordered. Deploy reality anchors. Let's show these machines. What happens when humans get angry? The human fleet spread out in a pattern that made no sense to traditional naval tactics. Instead of concentrated firepower, they created a web of overlapping reality distortion fields. Within those fields, the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. The Devourers tried to adapt, but adaptation requires consistent rules to work with. In the chaos of human-generated reality storms, their systems couldn't process what was happening fast enough to counter it. Devourer ships began breaking apart not from damage, but from existing in too many quantum states simultaneously. Others found their matter converting into energy without warning. The most unfortunate simply ceased to exist, deleted from reality by weapons that rewrote the fundamental nature of space and time. Enemy fleet neutralized, Parker reported. No. Human casualties, Hydra cities are secure. Below them, the aquatic aliens emerged from their deep shelters to see human ships hovering protectively over their world. 2 years had passed since humanity returned to Council space as saviors. The war against the Devourers had turned into a grinding conflict that tested every species in the galaxy. But slowly, steadily, the tide was turning in favor of the living. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Ascendant. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, incorporating technology from every Council species but improved by human innovation. His face showed the scars of a dozen battles, and his eyes held the weight of commanding the largest fleet in galactic history. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were veterans now, hardened by 2 years of constant warfare. They had learned to trust their admiral's tactical genius and their own ability to do the impossible when the situation demanded it. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from the Nexus system. The Devourers have turned it into their primary staging area." Morrison looked at the tactical display. The Nexus had once been a symbol of galactic peace, an artificial star system built by the Xanthari as a monument to cooperation. Now it was a nightmare of mechanical production, spawning new Devourer units at an exponential rate. "How many enemy ships are we looking at?" Morrison asked. "Conservative estimate? 50,000 vessels, with more being built every hour. They've converted the artificial planets into massive factories." Morrison nodded grimly. The Devourers had learned to use the galaxy's own infrastructure against it. Every world they conquered became a production center. Every defeated fleet became raw materials for more ships. General Paul Harrison's image appeared on the main screen. His uniform was dusty and torn from leading ground operations across a dozen worlds. Behind him, Morrison could see the mixed forces of humans and aliens who now fought together under human command. "Admiral," Harrison said, "my scouts have mapped the Nexus ground defenses. It's not going to be easy. The entire system is defended by adaptive mechanical guardians that learn from every attack." "What do you need?" Morrison asked. "Everything we've got," Harrison replied honestly. "This is going to be the biggest battle of the war. If we can take the Nexus, we cut off their main production center. If we fail—" Morrison understood. If they failed, the Devourers would have unlimited resources to rebuild their forces. The war would drag on for decades, with more worlds falling every year. "You'll have the full fleet," Morrison decided. "Prepare for Operation Endgame." Dr. Amy Collins had been working around the clock in her laboratory aboard the Ascendant. Her team of human and alien scientists had been studying Devourer technology, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. What they had found was disturbing. "Admiral," she said as she entered the bridge, "we've made a breakthrough. The Devourers aren't just mindless machines. They're controlled by something else." Morrison turned to face her. "What do you mean?" Collins activated a holographic display that showed the quantum structure of Devourer communication systems. "They're receiving orders from somewhere else. Another dimension, actually. There's an intelligence behind all this, directing their actions." Dr. Ben Rodriguez, who had been studying alien psychology for decades, looked at the data with growing understanding. That's why they adapt so quickly. They're not just machines learning from experience. They're being controlled by something that exists outside normal space-time. Can we reach this intelligence? Morrison asked. Theoretically, yes, Collins replied. But it would require technology we don't have. We'd need to build a weapon that can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Morrison thought about the implications. If they could strike at the source of Devour control, they could end the war in one decisive blow. But the technology required would push even human engineering to its limits. How long would it take to build such a weapon? He asked. 6 months minimum, Collins said. And that's assuming we can get cooperation from every species in the galaxy. We'll need their best scientists and their most advanced technology. Morrison made the decision that would define the final phase of the war. Do it. Whatever resources you need, you'll have them. The call went out across the galaxy. Every species that had once rejected humanity now sent their greatest minds to work on the Paradox Cannon project. Xanthari dimensional theorists worked alongside human quantum engineers. Hydra's biologists shared their knowledge of multidimensional life forms. Even the peaceful Mellerin contributed their understanding of harmonic resonance. Captain Lisa Parker commanded the UES Defiance as part of the massive fleet assembling for the assault on the Nexus. Her ship had been upgraded with the latest human technology, including weapons that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. All ships report ready for dimensional jump, she announced to Admiral Morrison. The human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 3,000 ships, each one incorporating the best technology from every species, all commanded by human officers who had learned to think in ways that confused any enemy. Morrison looked out at his fleet one last time before the battle. These ships represented not just human military might, but the combined knowledge and resources of an entire galaxy united under human leadership. It was a far cry from the diplomatic vessel that had been rejected by the Council 3 years ago. All ships, execute jump to Nexus system, Morrison ordered. The fleet materialized in the heart of enemy territory, facing odds that would have been impossible for any previous military force. 50,000 Devourer ships hung in space around the converted planets, their mechanical hulls gleaming in the artificial starlight, but the human fleet didn't fight like previous military forces. They used tactics that defied logic, weapons that shouldn't have been possible, and strategies that turned the enemy's own adaptability against them. Captain Parker's ship dove into the middle of the Devourer formation, her quantum disruption weapons creating chaos in the enemy ranks. Where human weapons hit, the Devourers couldn't adapt because the weapons kept changing the rules they were trying to adapt to. Enemy ships attempting to swarm formation Delta 7, Parker's tactical officer reported. Counter with pattern Omega, Parker replied calmly. Show them what happens when they try to predict human behavior. The human ships moved in formations that looked random but were actually based on chaos mathematics that no artificial intelligence could predict. The Devourers tried to counter each move, but by the time they adapted to one pattern, the humans had already shifted to another on the surface of Nexus Prime. General Harrison led the largest ground assault in galactic history. His forces included not just human Marines, but volunteers from every Council species. Cavalry shock troops swarmed Devourer positions while Sorak heavy weapons teams provided covering fire. Even the peaceful Mellerin had sent warriors, their bioluminescent forms adapted for combat through human genetic techniques. The battle raged through massive industrial complexes that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Devourer manufacturing centers rose like metal mountains, defended by mechanical guardians that learned from every attack. But Harrison's forces had learned too, and they used tactics that turned the enemy's learning ability into a weakness. Delta Squad, fall back and let them adapt to standard assault patterns, Harrison ordered, then hit them with the chaos protocols. The human forces would attack with conventional tactics, let the Devourers adapt, then switch to completely unpredictable methods that made their previous adaptation useless. It was a strategy that only worked because humans were willing to accept casualties in the short term for victory in the long term. Above the planet, the space battle reached its climax as Morrison's flagship engaged the Devourer command swarm. The Ascendant's reality anchor weapons prevented the enemy from retreating to parallel dimensions, while its quantum cannons deleted entire sections of the swarm from existence. "Admiral," Collins called from her laboratory, "the paradox cannon is ready for deployment." Morrison looked at the tactical display one more time. The battle was going well, but the war wouldn't be won until they struck at the source of Devourer. "Control. Deploy the Impossibility," Morrison ordered. The UES Impossibility materialized in the center of the battlefield, a ship that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Its captain, Rebecca Martinez, had been chosen for her unique psychological profile, the ability to think in ways that worked across multiple realities. "Captain Martinez," Morrison said over the communication link, "you are authorized to fire when ready." Martinez looked at her instruments, seeing readings that contradicted each other from moment to moment. Her ship existed in multiple states simultaneously, making navigation a matter of intuition rather than logic. "Firing paradox cannon," she announced, the weapon discharged across dimensional barriers, striking at the intelligence that controlled the Devourer swarm. Reality itself seemed to scream as the blast tore through the fabric of space-time. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Across the galaxy, every Devourer unit stopped moving. The mechanical swarm that had threatened to consume everything simply stopped. The silence that followed the paradox cannon's firing was unlike anything Admiral Jake Morrison had ever experienced. Across the galaxy, 50 million Devourer units simply stopped. Some shut down completely, becoming lifeless metal hulks drifting in space. Others continued basic functions but lost their deadly intelligence. A few developed minds of their own, but these proved manageable with normal weapons. Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Ascendant, watching the Nexus system transform from a nightmare of mechanical production into a graveyard of silent machines. His crew worked quietly, still not quite believing that the war was truly over. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining active Devourer units." "They're requesting instructions?" Morrison almost smiled. Even in defeat, the machines were trying to follow orders. "Tell them to power down and await salvage crews. The war is over." Dr. Amy Collins appeared on his screen from the research ship UES Discovery. Her face showed exhaustion but also triumph. "Admiral, preliminary analysis shows the dimensional intelligence is completely destroyed. Whatever was controlling the Devourers no longer exists." "What about the technology they left behind?" Morrison asked. "That's the interesting part," Collins replied. "Most of their adaptive systems are still functional, but without the controlling intelligence, they're just very advanced machines. We can study them safely now," Morrison nodded. "The Devourer technology would give humanity an even greater advantage over the other species. Not that they needed it anymore. 3 years of war had proven beyond doubt that humans were the dominant force in the galaxy. Captain Lisa Parker's image joined the communication from her ship in orbit around Nexus Prime. "Admiral," General Harrison reports, "the surface is secure. The manufacturing facilities are intact and could be converted for peaceful production." Morrison thought about that. The same factories that had produced instruments of destruction could now create tools for rebuilding the galaxy. Under human supervision, of course. "Excellent work, Captain. Begin salvage operations immediately. I want every piece of useful technology cataloged and secured." Over the following weeks, the true scope of humanity's victory became clear. The species that had once voted to exile humanity now competed with each other to offer tribute and cooperation. The Xanthari sent their most precious crystals as gifts. The Melon offered to terraform entire worlds according to human preferences. The Hydras promised exclusive access to their deep ocean research facilities. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived from Earth, aboard the new diplomatic vessel UES Dominion. The ship was 10 times larger than the Phoenix that had once carried humanity's humble requests for council membership. Now it carried humanity's terms for the galaxy's future. "Jake," Sullivan said as they met in his quarters, "the President has approved the Terran Accords. It's time to formalize the new government structure." Morrison reviewed the documents on his personal tablet. The terms were exactly what humanity deserved after saving the galaxy. Earth would be the capital world. English would be the official language. All military forces would serve under human command. All major research projects would require human approval. "What about resistance?" Morrison asked. "There won't be any significant resistance," Sullivan replied confidently. "A few Sorak hardliners are making noise about restoring the old balance of power, but they're vastly outnumbered by species that remember who saved them." The formal ceremony took place in Earth's orbit aboard Morrison's flagship. Representatives from every species gathered in the main conference room. The same aliens who had once voted against humanity's membership in their council. High Arbiter Velthok of the Zenthari was among them, his crystal body dimmed by age and defeat. The proud being who had pronounced humanity's exile now stood ready to accept human authority over his entire species. President Helen Carter appeared on the main screen from the White House. She had been re-elected for an unprecedented third term, her approval ratings soaring after humanity's victory over the Devourers. "Representatives of the galaxy," President Carter began, "we gather today not to celebrate conquest, but to establish a new order based on strength, wisdom, and the proven ability to protect innocent life." She paused, looking directly at the alien delegates. 3 years ago, you cast humanity out of your council because you feared our capacity for violence. You were right to fear it, but wrong about what it meant. Our strength doesn't come from our willingness to fight, but from our refusal to surrender when fighting is necessary. Morrison watched the alien faces as the president continued. Some looked ashamed, others appeared resigned. A few seemed genuinely grateful for human protection. "We could have let you face the Devourers alone," Carter said. "We could have protected only our own worlds and left you to your fate. Instead, we saved every species in this galaxy. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us fit to lead." The Terran Accords were signed without debate. Each species accepted their new status as autonomous regions within the Terran Commonwealth. Their fleets would be integrated into the Terran Defense Force. Their research would be coordinated by human administrators. Their trade would flow through human-controlled systems. High Arbiter Velthok was the last to sign. As he placed his crystalline hand on the document, he spoke for the first time since the ceremony began. "Humanity has proven its strength," he sighed quietly. "We accept your leadership because you have earned it through sacrifice and victory. But we hope you will prove as wise in peace as you were effective in war." Morrison stepped forward. "High Arbiter, wisdom is exactly what humanity intends to bring to this galaxy. The kind of wisdom that recognizes threats before they become extinctions. The kind of wisdom that builds strength before it becomes necessary to use it." Not everyone accepted the new order quietly. 3 months after the signing of the Terran Accords, a coalition of Sorak militants and Zenthari hardliners attempted a rebellion in the Outer Rim. They believed that humanity's forces would be weakened by victory and overconfident from success. They were catastrophically wrong, Admiral. Morrison's response was swift and overwhelming. The rebels expected to face the same humans who had once begged for council membership. Instead, they encountered the species that had just defeated the greatest threat in galactic history. The rebellion lasted exactly 72 hours. Human ships appeared in rebel systems before the insurgents even realized their communications had been intercepted. Quantum disruption weapons disabled rebel fleets without destroying them. Reality anchor systems prevented any escape to alternate dimensions. The defeated rebels were not executed or imprisoned. Instead, they were assigned to reconstruction duties in former Devour-held systems, working alongside human supervisors to rebuild worlds devastated by the war. It was a punishment that taught the value of cooperation while providing useful service to the galaxy. 5 years after the war's end, the transformation was complete. The galaxy operated under a system of order and efficiency that surpassed anything the old council had achieved. Trade flowed freely between systems under human oversight. Protected by the Terran Defense Force, scientific advancement accelerated as human researchers coordinated projects across species lines, combining alien knowledge with human innovation. Most importantly, there were no more wars between species. Not because of treaties or diplomacy, but because humanity served as the absolute authority in all disputes. When conflicts arose, human arbitrators settled them quickly and fairly. When their decisions were questioned, human strength ensured they were followed. Dr. Ben Rodriguez, now Earth Secretary of Interspecies Affairs, prepared his final report to the Terran Senate. After decades of studying alien cultures, he had become the galaxy's leading expert on managing interspecies relations under human authority. The transformation is remarkable, he wrote. Species that once saw each other as rivals now work together under human coordination. The Cavalry hive mind provides organizational efficiency for large projects. Xanthari crystalline technology enhances our communication networks. Melarum biological expertise helps terraform new worlds. All of it directed by human strategic thinking. He paused in his writing, looking out at the bustling space lanes around Earth. Ships from dozens of species carried goods and passengers throughout the galaxy, all operating under human traffic control systems. The former council members initially resented their new status, Rodriguez continued, but as the years passed, they began to appreciate the benefits of human leadership. No more devastating wars, no more technological stagnation, no more existential threats ignored until they became extinction events. Captain Daniel Roberts commanded the UES Eternity, humanity's newest flagship, as it patrolled the edge of former council space. Roberts was part of the new generation of human officers, those who had grown up during the war and knew no galaxy other than one where humanity led. A young ensign approached him on the bridge. The woman had been born after the war in a galaxy where human dominance was simply the natural order. "Captain," she asked, "do you think the aliens will ever challenge our authority again?" Roberts looked out at the stars, each one now protected by human strength and guided by human wisdom.